Aptology's been around. This is just the only commercial I have. It's been around for, wow, it's been around for 8 years. So we've been developing apps for a long time. And we've had, our clients have been anywhere from nonprofits, startups to the enterprise. We have a full stack team. And we've pretty much have made all the mistakes need to be, so we're pretty well experienced. And probably our most successful client was iOrderFresh. And they were able to raise $20 million. iOrderFresh is like a grocery delivery service in India. I also run the Startup Grind chapter in Sacramento, which is actually very similar to what this is. You got the networking here, and then you have a speaker. But usually, what we do is an interview with an entrepreneur. And in many ways, it's like our community getting together and talking and networking, and then also meeting with people from outside of our community and within the community. So if you have a chance, if you like to see what's going on in Sacramento, this is probably the best place to, or not best place, but a really good place to try it out. And we actually have a Christmas party on December 5th that's coming up. So today what I'm going to talk about is developing apps for profit. And what I'm going to really cover today, and it's really more on the business side, but there's a little bit of tech part of it, but it's mostly on the business side. So I'm going to talk about the groundwork that's involved in developing really more of a business. I'm going to go over the different monetization models, the different ways to make money, and then kind of a subset of that, I'm going to talk about the different ad models. And then I'm going to give like a really high-level overview of the app development process. And if you're looking for a developer, I'll talk about things you need to look for. And then I'll talk about alternatives to the traditional development process. And then I'll do a quick overview of app store optimization and kind of explain what that is. And just some parting advice if you want to try to make money on apps. So let's talk about the groundwork. And it usually ends up with an idea. And I remember the very first apps I built were for children, and I remember getting the idea when my daughter was on the playground, and I came home and just kind of worked on it. But really, what you really need to do after you have the idea is you need to really research that idea. And I remember I had a client that usually the second most asked question I get is, do you have an NDA? I sent him my NDA. He wasn't happy with it. He sent me his. And then he wanted a wet signature, so I, signed it, FedExed it back to him. And this dance went on for like 4 days. Finally got on the phone with him, and he starts telling me his idea. And I'm glad we were on the phone, because I actually did roll my eyes. I could actually feel it rolling. I did a quick search, and I found like 20 apps that did exactly what he's trying to do. 10 of them were free. I never heard back from him again after that. But I figure I saved him a lot of money. But if you do the research, it's not, if there's competitors, that's fine. Before Facebook, there was MySpace. Before Google, there was Yahoo. You don't have to be the best, but you have to know what's out there. You have to know what the competitor is. You need to know what the market's like. So you need to do that research. And after that research, if you feel like what you have is viable, you really need to put together a business plan. And I'm not really going to go over, the business plans, but good resources are the SBA. That's like your traditional business plan. And if you've gone through an accelerator, you're typically talking about the Canvas model, which is sort of this, it's sort of a nimble way to make a business plan, but it makes you look at different aspects of a business. And there's arguments of if a business plan is valued if it's worthwhile or not. But I think it's a good exercise just to think of all the things you have to do, all the things that's necessary to put in the business. And with apps, the one thing, and we had a discussion on the table, is you really need to have a marketing plan. And we've had, this has happened several times early on, where we'll develop an app, and it takes us several months. It finally goes live. We're all excited, and then no one's downloading the app. And the thing is, you really have to have a marketing plan. If you think about it, it's like if you had a really terrific book, and it's in the library somewhere in some shelf, it will never see the light of day. You really need to sort of advertise it. And that's the one thing I always stress is, have a business plan. Or part of it is you need to have a marketing strategy. So let me talk about the different ways you can make money from an app. So the first way that when I say how do you make money from an app is the cost of the app. This is actually an app called Black Tie, which is an app designed for millionaires, and $1,000. So I guess if you're going to spend $1,000 on an app, you really are a millionaire. But it's probably, and I'll go to it. This is one way. Another way to do it is, and this is generating app from the App Store, is in-app purchases. So if you guys have played Clash of Clans, this is where you could play the game without. It's a free game, but you can play without doing any money. But if you really want to get ahead of it, you have to buy these gems. And I remember when it first came out, I wanted to. It was Clash of Clans that actually still is one of the highest grossing apps on the App Store. And I wanted to understand how are they making money from a free app. So I started playing it, and I'm like one of the cheapest people ever, and I never buy anything. I ended up spending $50 on gems, and just to get ahead in the game. So with that in mind, what I tell people is, if you really want to make money from an app, it should be a free app. So this is a screenshot of the top grossing phone apps, and you really can't tell from here, but they're all, in this case, they're all free. And it's like, how is that possible? How can these be the top grossing apps if they're all free? Well, it's in-app purchase. And what I tell, and I'll just give an example of just one of the examples of one of our clients. We had a client that actually had a fairly successful app. They're getting thousands of downloads. And as soon as they charged, thousands of downloads a week. And as soon as they charged 99 cents for it, it went from thousands to 40. So what I tell people is, if you put a price on an app, it's a barrier for people to download it. If anything, what you should do is at least have a free period, or have a free, not a free version, but a free trial version where they can at least test it out. And if they find value in it, then there's an in-app purchase to sort of unlock it for the rest of it. So as a minimum, I would do, if you feel like it's something that should be sold, have it as a free app with like a trial period. Another way to make money from apps is advertising, and this is an example of a banner ad. And actually, I'm going to go more in depth in this in the next section. Something you probably haven't thought about is you can actually license your app. So a good example is there's app companies out there that make event apps. So if you are, you have an event for the chiropractors of America, they'll actually license an app from an event app and make an app, just for that event. That's an example. We actually license an app ourselves. It's usually geared for small businesses and nonprofits, where we'll make an app really inexpensively, and then we'll charge like a hosting fee once a month, like a $70 hosting fee. So another way to make, is to develop something that you find is useful and then license it. So anybody know what these guys have in common? Yes. Before they were all they're known as apps now, but before they became apps, they all had websites. That's exactly it. You're the first person to get something like that. So a good example is Fandango. So I'm dating myself, but it used to be when Fandango came out, you actually had to go on a desktop computer, you buy it, you printed it out, and then you take it to the movie theater. When they develop a mobile strategy where you can buy it from the app and then you just pass the code in it, the revenue essentially doubled almost overnight, from going from the desktop version to having a mobile version. I think one of the more interesting ones is Chase. So Chase, you probably use the Chase app, and you could deposit, you could take a picture of your check and deposit it. That feature alone has decreased traffic into the banks like 40%. So if you ever go to a Chase bank, you only ever see one or two tellers. There's a lot of windows, but there's only like one or two tellers. And what happens is, if they start getting any kind of line, those people that sit in the back of the bank, they're called bankers. So what they'll do is they'll gently sit you down, they'll do whatever the transaction is, and they'll try to, upsell you on a refi or a, credit card. So it's fundamentally changed the way they've done business. The other, and this is the one that's been very famous, is to deliver a service. So, can you imagine when the iPhone first come out, that you'll have an app, and you could actually, a stranger will pick you up and take you where you want to go, and that company will be worth like $60 billion. And the other examples I have there is Airbnb, and the one on the right is Doctors on Demand, where it's an app where if you wanted to meet with a physician, you go in, you sign up. It's like a $40 fee, and you get into FaceTime meeting with a physician. And she could even prescribe drugs. And we did a similar app for lawyers. And this model is what I call a resource in demand. So you have a demand here, it connects the resource, makes the connection, and you get some sort of cut of the transaction. And this is probably the most frequently asked type of app that I'm asked to develop. It's like, I want the Uber of hairstylists, or I want the Uber of chefs. I mean, all sorts of variations of the Uber model. But it is actually successful. So, since I've been doing this, since I've been, been in business, there's always these sort of hot new, what I call frontier technologies. It's drones, it's been wearables, blockchain is big now, AI is huge. And so what they all have in common at some point is that they need to have, because mobile is so ubiquitous, at some point they need to have a mobile interface. So the core technology may not require an app, but if they want to engage a population at some point, even like a drone, a lot of the new drones have some sort of app interface where you can actually see the video. Have to have some sort of app interface. So the last method is just user acquisition. So when WhatsApp was, WhatsApp was acquired for 19 billion, Instagram was acquired for 1 billion. And if you looked at their business model at that time, their revenue stream at the time, they really weren't making any money. In fact, they were probably negative. But what they did have is they had a tremendous amount of users, 500 million users. And I think last time I looked at it, there's something like 10 billion transactions a day on. I think the number is probably higher on WhatsApp at the time. So they got acquired, and it's up to someone else to figure out how to monetize it. And if you know how to do this, I'd like to work for you. So let me talk about the different mobile ad models. And this is the banner ads. Most people think about this when they think of ads. It's where you have a banner at the top or below. And if you touch it, or if you accidentally touch it, all sorts of annoying things happen. This is called an interstitial. So an interstitial is like if there's a natural pause in the app. Let's say if you're playing a game and you're going from one level to another, and there's a natural pause, this pops up, and it could be like a video or something, and it's like a commercial on TV. So just a different ad model. This is called an offer wall. So this is sort of interesting. It's really specifically for apps that have like virtual currency or virtual products. So the examples I had showed you earlier was Clash of Clans. And there's been similar games where you have to earn, to kind of get ahead, you need to have some sort of gem or digital gem. And so you can usually either pay like, up to $100 for a lot of gems, or you can go on an offer wall here where you can maybe sign up for Netflix, and then they'll give you like 1,000 gems or whatever for that action. This one's called a notification model, and it doesn't. So what it is, it's almost like a Trojan horse. So if in your app you put an SDK with the provider, and they download your user downloads it, they actually get like pop-up ads. And Apple actually won't allow it, so this won't be seen on Apple. And I personally think this is horrible, because if they figure out it's your app that's doing it, they're going to delete it. So, but it's just a different an ad model. Native ads is actually what really has fundamentally is the kind of like probably the best way for advertising. So if you look at Facebook or LinkedIn, they use native ads, and so when I'm looking at my Facebook feed, and I'm obviously flagged as a geek, so I'll see Star Wars ads and Star Trek ads, and oh, cool, T-shirt, and so I'll start looking at it. So it does work, and it's effective, because if you look at Facebook, they're just a juggernaut, and this is their main way of ad revenue. The rewards model is actually my favorite one I like to talk about. So the rewards model is geared towards apps that have some sort of achievement or some sort of level. So traditionally, if it's a game and you kill the dragon and save the princess, you you beat the level, it could actually trigger out a reward. So congratulations, you just won yourself a $5 coupon off Best Buy. And what I've seen personally is I have an app called Runkeeper, which is I use to track my, not run, it's really walk. But occasionally it'll say something like, congratulations, you've done your personal best. And then I'll get a coupon, you've got 75 cents off a free energy bar. I'm like, oh, cool. And I'll go ahead and say accept it because it's already got me programmed in, and I'll get an email coupon. And what's great about it, it's sort of like a win-win because the developer of that app will get something like 20 cents for that transaction. So if you're looking at doing advertising, you really need to, when you're developing an app, you need to actually plan for it. So if you're, even something as simple as a banner ad, you need to leave space like 65 pixels at the top or bottom for that ad. Or if you're going to use the rewards model, you need to figure out what the achievement levels are. So if this is the monetization model, you just sort of need to sort of plan for that and make it part of the app. So I'm going to give you kind of a 90,000-foot view of mobile app development. And when I talk to my clients, I really break it down into 3 areas. I talk about scope, user interface design, and coding. What I like to describe to the scope is like if you wanted to build a building or a house, you have to hire an architect, a mechanical engineer, surveyors, and they'd have to develop like blueprints, architecture design, mechanical drawings, plumbing, diagrams. The same thing has to be done when you're developing an app. You need to have a plan. And the thing I usually recommend is first doing the wireframe. A wireframe is like a storyboard. And in this case, this is actually using a software called Balsamic. And I like it because it looks like it's hand-drawn. So my clients know that's not what the app is supposed to look like. It's supposed to convey flow and functionality. And we actually have used other software where it looks more like it, then they get caught up in the colors and stuff. So this is why I like using the wireframe. And I think what's great about the wireframe is once you have it done, it's just pictures. And then you could show people what your idea is and get their feedback. And then you can reiterate. So it's kind of an easy way. If you're going to modify your idea, this is kind of the place to do it. Is when it's just at the drawing level, and you can easily change it. Sure. Well, the app is built. It's built on a computer. I mean, it's on a laptop. Yeah, but as far as building the concept of it, this is like right now. This is sort of like a rough draft of the drawing. Is the way I like to describe it.
Show the back pages of the book.
Oh, yeah. So the book I wrote, I basically have a bunch of blank screens here. And what I'll actually do for clients is I'll actually send them a PowerPoint. If they want to do it themselves, I'll send them a PowerPoint, and all it has is like blank iPhone screens, and they could, they know how to use PowerPoint drawing tools. They do it in PowerPoint, or I've seen people just print it out and they handwrite it. But this really is kind of like, you don't build a house without having a blueprint. This is the blueprint. As part of that is you're going to have written requirements. So written requirements could be, they sort of fill in the detail of what's not in the wireframe. Or they could explain the wireframe a little bit more. Or if it's like a medical app, you need to say that it needs to be HIPAA compliant. Or if it's, if there needs to be some performance level, like you need to have like a 5-second response time. This is where you would write it in the written requirements. And then the other thing that's also helpful is the architecture. And in this case, this is the app we developed a long time ago. And it's got a lot of integrations to third-party things. So, right, this is the app that does it does the FaceTime meeting with lawyers. So, here we have the FaceTime provider. It's built on AWS. We have push notifications here. We have the API, database here. So this sort of kind of gives you a pictorial depiction of what all the things that you're trying to do in something that could be quite complex. So I always tell people this is something they could probably do yourself. In fact, I think it should be something you do yourself that you struggle with and draw it. But if you're doing it, you need to understand what the phone capabilities are. So right now, like the iPhone 10 came out, and we're still figuring out what it can do. But once you figure it out, then you can start developing an app that leverages, designing an app that leverages those features. You want to have the goal in mind, what the objective is that you want to do. And actually, one of the things we do when we develop apps is we research other apps. So, like the thing I tell people is we get a lot of Uber of whatever. I want the Uber of chefs or whatever. So when we first started doing these type of projects, we researched Uber. Like I downloaded Uber, I would get a ride. I would actually talk to drivers. I would ask to look at their space. I actually signed up as a driver just to see what the experience is. And so if you are trying to do an app that is doing something similar that another app is, the best way to start is research that other app. And what I give Uber a lot of credit for is it's actually a very elegant app, but as we've developed it, there's a lot of moving parts in it they've actually kind of figured out and solved. And usually if you're developing, doing a wireframe, there's a lot of tools out there like Balsamic. Actually, our team is actually standardizing it on Sketch. But me personally, when I do a wireframe, I use PowerPoint. I'm old school. I know how to use PowerPoint. I know how to use the drawing tools, and I don't really want to, I don't want to spend the time to use another graphic tools. The purpose of it is to do the flow and functionality. So the scope is something I feel that you should be able to do yourself. The user interface design and coding, that's where you probably need to get some expertise in. So let me talk about things. If you're looking to select a developer, some things you need to really consider. And actually, what do you think the most asked question I get is? Yes, how much does an app cost? And the second most asked question is, do you have an NDA? But so before you engage like a contractor, or even if you're doing it in-house, actually, even if you have someone that you're going to hire as a developer, you really need to have all this figured out. You need to have the wireframe, the architecture, and the written requirements done before you engage, especially before you engage an outside contractor. It's okay to ask for an NDA. I mean, if you all saw the Mark Zuckerberg movie, you really should have an NDA. And it's, like I said, it's the second most asked question. So much so that I actually have it on my phone. I could actually email you a signed NDA, and then we could start talking. In general, if you're gonna go to market with an app, you really should just focus on Android and iPhone. Android and iPhone basically make like 97% of the market, and I think it's even higher now that Windows actually has officially declared defeat. So, but in general, you really should focus on Android and iPhone. And what I have found personally is that iPhone is really dominant in the United States, but if you go into outside the United States, like in Africa or even India, Android's very dominant.
What about Kindle?
Yeah, that.
Or is that an Android subset?
Well, it's sort of like it's really like a reading book thing. And Amazon is, like the Fire is, it's a flavor of. So like the Amazon tablets, they have a flavor. They have their own style of Android. So if you develop an Android app, it's just a slight modification to make it work on the Amazon family. So maybe you're not talking the Kindle itself, but you're talking about the Fire and stuff. One thing that you really need to consider is that the app is what you see, but really a lot of the hard work is done in the cloud. So for example, Yelp is essentially a database, and the app is a way to query the database, based on your food or your address. So if you're, I've seen this a lot. Well, a person will want to develop, Uber, and they hire an iOS guy, but they don't have a back-end guy. So you need to have someone that can do the back end too. And design is actually a very important part of, when you're doing a design for an app, it's actually very important. It's actually, one of the most, from a marketing, it's very important. And there's a statistic like a person will download or not download an app. Something like 80% of it is just based on the icon alone. And it's so important that I was listening to a speech or a talk by, they're a company in San Francisco that does like the character games, like Strawberry Shortcake and Scooby-Doo. And so they have a factory, like they actually make an app like once a month with these characters. But whenever they go live with an app, what they do is they make 40 designs of the icon, and they have a focus group to sort of narrow down which icon they're going to use. That's how important design is. And in general, like, you've probably seen bad apps that you were frustrated with where the design was just terrible, and you just don't use it. And that's the reality of it. If you're looking at a company, just also look at their portfolio. This is ours. So take the time to download the app, see what other apps they've downloaded, and that's kind of a good indication of that developer's capability. So this is probably something that people don't think about, is the source code. So my very first project I developed a bunch of kid games, and it was called I, Mother Goose, and we even got on KCRA. We actually got on TV for that app. And it was my idea. I hired a developer. I actually bought the developer his computer, and my wife did the audio. I got designers, and then one day he goes, "It's the source code is my intellectual property." And I was like, "Holy crap!" And I tried to buy him out. He basically refused, and I had to kill it because I didn't own the IP to it. And so when I talk about to people that are using, and I've talked to other clients that have done the same thing, and the analogy is like if you guys, you older people that have been married, if you hire a wedding photographer, you know that the photographer owns the copyright. And then you have to either get them to release the copyright or you have to buy it from them. It's the same thing with if you hire a contractor to develop your code. The person that does the typing, that touches the keyboard, technically owns the copyright to it. So where you're okay with this is if you have a developer and he's an employee, like a W-2 employee, that's not a contractor, then you as the employer own it. But if it's a contractor, that person owns and so what I tell this people up front, so when people do work with us, I tell them at the end of the project, after we receive final payment, you will own the source code and the IP. And I feel that's, from a legal standpoint, that may not be necessary, but I think from morals, if you build a house, you want to have the keys to it. And if you're working with a contractor that won't do this, walk away, because you can't do anything with it. You can't get investors because you don't own the IP. So, there's all sorts of, there's Scrum, Agile, and all these buzzwords that I could bring up in app development. But the reality is when you work with a developer, you need to understand where you stand in that process. So what you don't want to have is you hire a developer, you don't hear from them for like 3 months, 6 months, they come back, here's our project, and it's crap. You want to be part of the process where you have weekly meetings so you could, you're giving feedback, you're approving, you're disapproving. So by the time it goes live, you're not surprised because you have been part of the process. So whatever the process is, you need to be sure that you are part of it. And I just talked to a customer yesterday. He kind of wanted me just to run with the idea, and I said, no, if you really don't want to be in a process, you shouldn't be doing this. In dealing with a contractor, there's, you can look at an hourly or fixed rate. As a developer, I love hourly because I'm assured of profit. But as a customer, as a potential customer, I would try to work with a developer that will give you a fixed price for the contract. However, and what that does is makes the developer responsible for giving you a product under a certain budget. However, in order for that to happen, you have to have firm requirements. You have to have the wireframe. You have to have the written requirements. You have to have the architecture done. And it's just like if you build a house and you say 3 bedrooms and I want a kitchen counter, and you're thinking marble, and the contractor thinking it's tile. You really have to spell out things in detail in order for the fixed price to work, because otherwise if you have ambiguity, you either change orders or you have conflict. And I call this what if you get hit by a bus. So I actually had a prospect call me, and they're in a panic. They have a deadline, and their developer has disappeared. He's not returning their call, he's not emailing. And I got a call like maybe 3 weeks later, and apparently he had a DUI and he was thrown in county jail, so he was out for a while. But this is one area where maybe working with a company is better than a freelancer, because we've had other situations, us personally, where we had a developer whose dad had, he had some sort of family crisis, and I get it, you family first, and he just left. And so we had to pull off another developer from another project to finish it. But we finished it, but it was a little late, but we finished it. So that's one place where a contracting a company has an advantage over a freelancer. Talk about maintenance plans. So right now, I've been busy doing a lot of work because iOS 11 has gone live. So we've been upgrading a lot of our apps, and so some of our projects we do have a clause there. They pay us a maintenance fee, and we'll make sure that their app is current. We have other clients that just want to do it on an as-needed basis. So, probably about a month from now, we're going to get a lot more calls from some of our clients that, don't have a maintenance plan, and we'll just sort of give them a quote for upgrading. So, but you need to realize, in order for an app to be viable, it needs to be constantly upgraded. In fact, we have a few apps that were built on iPhone 4, like really old, like iOS, and I could tell the owners just hasn't maintained it, and Apple eventually just kicks it off the market because it just doesn't actually work anymore. Ask them you could also, if you're working with a contractor, ask them what kind of warranty they have. See, what happens if there's an undiscovered bug. Us, for example, we do have a warranty that if they find a bug within a year, we'll fix it if it's our fault. And ask for references. Just like if you're going to have a contractor build you a deck, ask for references. Call them up. Ask them things like, how was the communication? How was it when handling problems? How was the quality? And the last thing is price. And I actually put this last. It is a factor, and I've seen some people always go. If you always go with the lowest price contractor, bad things happen. But it is an important factor. But don't let that be the be all. So I'll talk about different app development alternatives. So there's a do-it-yourself type products. Seattle Cloud and YouBuild are good examples where they have a WYSIWYG interface, and you could build an app. I mean, almost with no, with little technical expertise. The only thing I caution you now, I mean, I haven't looked at these slides, but just recently in the latest Apple guidelines, they actually will reject any apps done on a template. So as I bring this up, I'm like, well, this may not actually be a viable solution anymore for you, at least on the Apple side. On Google, you can do anything you want. And then, we actually, there's sort of a cross, which is us, where we actually have this is the product that we license. So we actually do have a product where we build on a template that I say that, but we've been able to get through Apple because we make enough modifications so it's not considered a template. But there's other companies out there. There's Mobile Roadie, there's Mobile App Loader, and there's actually a ton of these type of template-based firms. Another alternative is what I call authorware. So there's AppCelerator, which is Titanium, Cordova, PhoneGap. And what it is you build it on their platform, and it spits out code into other, it spits out code for different operating systems. We actually have avoided this because it's like the thing we had saw. It's like it's a layer of complexity. So we found that apps built on PhoneGap are not really quick. It's like I'm dating myself, but Windows used to run on top of DOS. So it's like that. But with this said, we have been looking at something called React Native, which we actually are actually offering to our clients. So instead of having an iOS guy and an Android guy having two separate developers, we'll have one developer that actually builds it on React Native, and then we'll make sure that we do enough modifications so it'll work on the iPhone and work on the Android. The other thing is you could do use templates out there. There's a few places where you could actually buy source code, and then you can reskin it. So one of the things we, in my at Startup Prime, one of our speaker gifts is I actually make a karate game for them, and we just basically change the head and change the wording, and we have a new app, and we just publish on the Android App Store. So another option is you can maybe find the source code. In fact, I'm talking to a person that wants to do like a Tinder-like app. He has a small budget, and I quoted him like $30,000 to do it from scratch. Doesn't have it, so I said, well, let me look at some source code. And I said, well, and I kind of did a quick search on Tinder-like app source codes, and I said, well, we could probably do it this. We could buy the source code and reskin it for you for $6,000. But the downside is you're kind of stuck with that, the way that's built, unless you modify that source code. So let me talk about App Store optimization. So you've heard of SEO, which is search engine optimization. The App Store has something similar. It's called App Store optimization. It's based on these three factors: it's keywords, ratings, and downloads. So keywords are, with Apple, you actually have 100 characters to write keywords, and about 30 characters in the name if you want to try to squeeze the title of the app in the name. I mean, you want to try to squeeze keywords in there. And it's like, I want to look for, and in some cases it works really well for you, and in some cases it doesn't, it's awful. So we built an app for a meditation app for a client several years ago, and they said they cannot find their app using keywords. And when I looked at the keywords, and there was like 80 meditation apps. There was more than that, and I couldn't find their app. It was buried so far down. In some cases, it can work for you. So we built an app for Superior Boat Repair in Rancho Cordova, and they sell speedboats. And one of the keywords I think was like Nautilus, or the name of a speedboat. And whenever I deal with a client, I tell them you need to market your app. You need to put it on your literature. You need to let your customers know you have an app. But when we started looking at the data, they had a ton of downloads, and I couldn't figure out why they were getting a ton of downloads, because they were just this little shop in Rancho Cordova. And I finally figured out they were using keywords for the boat model, the boat manufacturer, and people were searching for that in the App Store, and they're finding their app. All things being equal, keywords and downloads, if your app has higher ratings, you'll bubble up higher on the app, in the App Store, in the App Store search. And what I find very interesting, if you're familiar with the Apple Store, in order to get even the ratings, you need to have like 5 reviews. And I've seen like apps done by like big enterprise companies like Walgreens and Sears, and when I look at the reviews, they don't have any reviews. Like their employee, their own development team didn't bother to give them enough reviews so that it would be seen on Apple. So, if you do have an app in the App Store, make sure that your friends download it and review them. And in fact, you can go to some places and pay for people to review it. It's not ethical, but it is done. But all things being equal, if your app has more reviews, it will show up higher in the App Store. And the same thing, in all things being equal, if your app has more downloads than another app, it will also show up in the App Store. So one of the key things, that I've talked to people that really are in on the marketing side, is if you are in the top 200 apps on, if you could search on it, if you're in the top 200, it's like being it's like you're highlighted. So if you are, like if you go to the grocery store on the end cap, if your product is on the end cap, it has higher visibility. So like being on the top 200, you have higher visibility, which leads to more downloads. So some parting words. If you are thinking about trying to make money from an app, what I really suggest is solve a problem for a niche market. And this is an example of, we developed an app a number of years ago for longshoremen. I didn't actually know what longshoremen was, but these are the guys that take stuff off ships and on ships. And to me, it's like, well, it's not really high tech, and they aren't. So they're typically union workers, and they literally have a book like this, where they put in all their hours and what ships they work on. And so the gentleman was a longshoreman. He said, I want to do it on an app, which I would do too. So basically, he tracks all his hours and his vacation days on an app. And when we were working with him, we told him you need to have a backup so if you lose your phone, it's saved somewhere. But if I look at his model, he wants to charge like a subscription for 99 cents for this product. And if you look, and this is where the research comes in, there are 250,000 longshoremen in the United States. So if he's at 10% of them to give him 99 cents, he's making $25,000 a month. So you solve a problem for a niche market. And the marketing will be very easy because there's probably a longshoreman magazine and you can put flyers up at the different halls and you've got it yourself covered. So another thing too that are you guys familiar with what the term MVP is? It stands for minimum viable product. And if you are developing and it's fun, like if you're in the brainstorming mode and you're trying to develop a product, and you can start adding features. And I've done it. I've been guilty of where you start adding features. But the thing you have to consider is the more features you add to it, the longer it's going to take to develop, and the more money it's going to take to develop. And the other thing too is you may be building features that no one wants. And I had a client that his wireframe was 90 pages long, and I kind of thought this comes from Lean Startup, and I kind of explained them the MVP thing, which is actually kind of counter because basically it's more money for me. The more money, it's a bigger project for more money. But I was trying to convince him, explain the MVP and process, and he was, that's great. And then he would add 5 more features to the product. So at least I feel like I did my due diligence to explain the process. So there's a whole book called Nail It and Scale It. And I had a client several years ago who actually had a pretty healthy funding. He had about he had like $2.5 million for a startup. And he was trying to create a product that competed against Yelp. And the problem that I see was he was trying to do this. He was trying to go nationwide on a $2.5 million budget. And in the end, it died horribly. He only got traction in South Florida, which is where he had his sales rep. And to this day, he still owes me money. But if you look at how successful startups have developed, you look at Facebook. They went from campus to campus. And then you look at Uber. They started out in San Francisco. They perfected the model. And then they expanded to different communities, one community at a time. And the thing is you need to make sure that model is good. There was a startup called Rocket Spoon. They were like a YC darling, and they had like $13 million, and they were like in Oakland. And what they tried to do is they had an imperfect model, and then they tried to, without perfecting the model, they tried to expand in two other cities, and with an imperfect model. And eventually that $13 million fizzled, and they were like they were one of the spectaculars, like, failures. But ideally, if you have a small budget, smart small, prove the model at a local area. And it doesn't even have to be geographic. If you look at Amazon, when they first came out, they just sold books. That's all they did. Now they threaten the entire free market by selling everything. But you start somewhere, perfect the model, and expand out. So this is what I covered.